In this presentation, we will be discussing how we use the Six Sigma method to improve the transfer student process at Carroll College. I am Fiona Brasfield, and also presenting with me is Laurel, Kassa, Thomas Austefjord, and Stephen Creiigh. In order to understand our project, we first need to explain the Six Sigma DMAIC methodology. DMAIC stands for Define, Measure, Analyze, Improve, and Control, as you can see on the left of the slide. In the Six Sigma method, we use y as a function of x to find our main variables that could be causing issues. An x variable in the process is an input provided by internal suppliers, and a y variable is provided to the customers. The goal is for the control inputs, which are the x variables, to be controlled such that the outputs, which are the y variables, meet the customer requirements. If utilizing the Six Sigma method, you can see with the graphic of the funnel how working through defining the process and the issues with the process, collecting data, and understanding failure modes and effects, analyzing the data, and understanding the next steps will then help improve the process. To the right, there are some concepts and definitions that relate to each stage of the DMAIC model, and further into the presentation, we will explain what they are and how the Six Sigma method utilizes them to help improve the process. This is an expedited example of our project charter. In short, the project charter is a contract between the project champion, the stakeholders, the master black belt, and the green belt candidates. The project charter defines the scope of the project, including the finances, and helps flesh out the issues or goals that are in need of improvement. As you can see on the slide, our strategic project goal, also known as our business why, is to allow admission and new student services staff to be able to process more quickly and efficiently. This why leads us to what we want to see once improving this business why, which is an increase in number of transfer students at Carroll College. This then leads to our main problem statement, or our overall project why, which is Carroll College wants to increase the number of transfer students from 50 to 60 per year to 100 a year without increasing admission staff. All of this information is agreed upon in the project charter at the beginning of the project.
In order to determine our project why, we sat down with our team and established what was the process by which transfer students are matriculated, that is, making a full application and starting classes at Carroll in the admissions process. And the process is from the time the admission staff gets a prospective student's inquiry, then the student submits an application, the application is evaluated for admission, the transcript is evaluated for transfer credits and incomplete credits, and the student is then enrolled in Carroll College. We'll look at that just a little bit more in depth in the next slide. Starting with our first meeting, we sat down with our team and had to line out exactly what is the admissions process. And that's what this slide will show here. So the admissions office will receive an inquiry from a prospective student. They will communicate with that prospective student back and forth until such time as that student decides they want to apply to Carroll. Of course, the application process is not only the actual application, but also the entrance essay and any unofficial transcripts the student may have to send to Carroll. Once those have been received, the admissions office by hand goes through each transcript and, checking against a set of metrics, verifies which classes will transfer for credit to Carroll. It's something that has to be done, again, by hand. It's very time-consuming. For a student that only attended a single institution, it can be a fairly quick process. But for older students who have attended multiple institutions, each transcript has to be gone through piece by piece, class by class, curriculum for curriculum, to determine which credits will transfer. As that's done, that information is stored not only in a hard copy file, but also in a credit transfer worksheet, which is stored on a SharePoint site or SharePoint database they call Slate. That information is available for viewing by the admissions office, by the registrar's office, and by the academic advising office. Once those transcripts have been completed, official transcripts are sent for, and those are again checked and verified. And then those are sent to the registrar's office, who has the final say on which credits officially do transfer for credit to Carroll. The registrar, once they've made that determination, that information goes back to the admissions office, who then takes the hard copy file and sends it to the academic advising office. And the academic advising office is responsible for final registration, making advisor assignments, and the final matriculation into Carroll. The problem that we identified, however, as we went through this was the admissions office and registrar's office is a paperless operation, whereas the academic advising office is not. So at this point, they're still in the process of making the transition from paper to paperless, and that thereby the process does have a few stumbling blocks. What we found as we went through this is that there are actually two components to applications being made to Carroll by transfer students that have an effect. One, of course, is the actual application process itself, but the other is also, as we found as we went into our KJ analysis, which we'll be discussing shortly, is the marketing side of things. We finally decided that the process itself, the admissions process, is the process, at least at this point, until such time as the full shift to paperless can take place. Something else that we needed to verify or establish was what was the relationship between inquiries, applications, and eventual matriculations to Carroll. And we received data for a 4-year time period from 2015 through 19 on the number of inquiries that were made, the number of applications that were received, and the number of eventual matriculations. And aside from a significant drop after the first 2 years, Carroll had been using a program called FISH to generate contacts for inquiries, which they eventually phased out after the 17 school year. So 2018 and 2019 was without FISH, but what we found was that the data stayed fairly consistent. Regardless of the number of inquiries, as a ratio, the number of applications stayed consistent and the number of matriculations stayed consistent, again, as a ratio, as identified by these charts here. As you can see, the blue line stays well within the upper and lower control limits, so there are no extreme outliers, there are no severe peaks or valleys in any of this. So the data was consistent, which again kind of led us to understand that the admissions process itself wasn't at the heart of the matter, or at least was, as far as where our project needed to go, was not at the heart of the matter. And as we'll discuss in the KJ analysis coming up shortly, again, we found that it was more of a marketing issue than an admissions process issue.
The next stage of the DMAIC process is the KJ analysis. Now, for this part of the process, you get your whole team together and you all get sticky notes and you start off with black markers. Now, you write down all your ideas on the sticky notes, and each sticky note is a separate idea, and you post them onto the board. Now, you can write as many sticky notes as you want. What's really important is to get all of the variables and factors that you think are crucial to improving the process onto the board. And everyone does this, and once everyone is finished writing down their black level sticky notes, you then get to look at all the sticky notes. Now, for our group, we had around 60 to 70 black level sticky notes that we were able to use, and in the slide I only put 2. That's because there was just so much. I just wanted to put some examples down so you could see what the black level sticky notes looked like. Now, we would take those black level sticky notes, and for the second part of the KJ analysis, we would group those black level sticky notes together to make the red level. Now, as you can see, we only have 7 red levels. So, we were able to cut down from about 70 to 7 from grouping together to kind of find the key variables and factors in this process. And then once we have the red levels, we actually group some of those together to create the blue levels. Now we have 5 blue level KJs. That's information, transfer credit issues, time commitments, financial burdens, and emotional hurdles. And all of these blue levels have lots of sticky notes built up into them, and we are able to really take those 70 sticky notes we started with and consolidate them into 5 main categories to focus on going forward. The next step in the DMAIC process is the CNE Matrix. Now, this step is very important because earlier on we've been building up a lot of variables, and now we get to take those variables and focus them into the most important ones. Now, as you can see from our chart, we have different scores, and we get those scores by taking the inputs and factoring out how they do against certain y's. And we had about 7 or 8 y's in our CNE matrix, and for each y there's also a level of importance, 1 through 10. And once we see how it factors in, We then take that number, we multiply it by the importance level, and then we add it to all the other y's. And that's how we get the score. Now we decided to cut off after 11 variables because we felt like 11 was a lot of variables. We didn't want to have too little and cut it too short, but we also felt that after those 11 there is a steady decrease in the level of importance. So as you can see, number one, the high cost of tuition actually had our highest score. So for the CNE Matrix, that aspect or that input was the most important. The next stage in the DMAIC process is the FMEA. Now the FMEA takes key process inputs. The key process inputs that we have were the top 11 from the CNE Matrix. And it takes these and we look at potential failure modes, potential failure effects, the severity of this happening, potential causes, how often this happens, and we look at current controls, and this helps us come up with actions that are recommended, and we also get to figure out who's responsible for why this is happening. And this is really important because it helps us move forward, and we get to really look into those key inputs, and we actually went from 11 to 13, and that's because some of the key inputs had multiple things that could happen, and we wanted to expand off of those. So the FMEA is where we actually take the key inputs that we truncated down from the bigger number before, and then we take those small inputs and we expand them even further out. And once again, we have a cutoff point. So we decided to cut off after 7 variables, and I know it's hard to see on the chart, that's why we have it typed out. And once again, the cost of tuition being too high for students' financial standing is the most important variable. And now we can look into this more. This will help us find different process improvements now that we've really found key factors to focus on. The next stage in the DMAIC process is the multivariable studies. And we have a wonderful tool called Minitab, which has helped us do different multivariable studies. As you can see on the slide, we have different chi-squared tests, which we use to analyze different things and help us see if there is a relationship between a variable and if a transfer student matriculates to Carroll College. Now, what we need to look at in this chi-squared test is actually the p-value, which you can find towards the bottom. Now, if the p-value is low, and a low p-value is any p-value that is lower than 0.05, then the null hypothesis must be rejected. And from these different calculations in the chi-squared tests, we've been able to find out that there is absolutely no relationship between the transfer student's major and if they decide to come to Carroll. There is also no relationship between the gender of the transfer student and if they decide to come to Carroll. However, we have found that there is a relationship for which region they are from and if they decide to come to Carroll. Now we can use these relationships that we've tested to help us improve our marketing. That way we know what to focus on, and this can help us be more effective in our marketing and help us get more transfer students to matriculate to Carroll College.
In the previous slide, Thomas explained our FMEA chart and how each student has a different reason for why they decided not to come to Carroll. But after our research, these 4 on the slide were the most prominent through our analysis. The first being cost of tuition for students' financial standing. The numbers when applying for schools can be scary, Especially being a private Catholic school, Carroll's tuition might look a little high. This is somewhat of a misconception and a deterrent to students because Carroll offers a multitude of scholarship options. This should be more known to transfer students, so they're not turned away. Another option would be that there are even more scholarships offered to those who are struggling financially. The second point for our potential improvement is family and parenting challenges that students and non-traditional students go through. If Carroll offered more online options, people might be more inclined to pursue their degree. Offering online options would alleviate stress that comes with going to class every day and not being able to bring their family along. Our third point is fear due to age. Most people want to be accepted and fit in the crowd. And if one may stick out, there is potential hesitation. We want to terminate the hesitation and turn it into matriculation. Carroll is filled with many different students, and yet it still feels like a family. It needs to be more known to the public that Carroll is accepting of any human being and that there is no typical Carroll College student. Our fourth and final improvement relates to the previous one, fear of fitting in. We want everyone to know that anyone can find a group here at Carroll, and we would do this through advertising and marketing. There are many different clubs and groups at Carroll, such as Outdoor Biking Club, Climbing and Running Club. There are different sports to attend, such as basketball, volleyball, football, and others, as well as volunteer clubs such as St. Jude and other different types. We want everyone to be able to find their groove. We want to make it clear that there are solutions to these problems, and throughout this project process, we have determined that we may be able to improve transfer student matriculations. In the future, we want to better transfer student numbers, but we believe that there is data we are missing out on to help us improve matriculations. Based on evaluating the process, we recommend creating a digital form for transfer students in order to better communicate why they are declining Carroll College's offer of admission. This will then help our future admission and marketing staff understand and streamline more of the major issues that might be present. Based on the factors we see from our current data, we recommend targeting the financial aid and marketing aspects of the transfer process in order to increase enrollment. This would mean potentially increasing merit scholarship amounts or special discounted tuition offers for transfer students and focusing more marketing efforts to transfer students.
Now, while the project is not yet complete, we still have a few steps to go. We feel confident that we can optimize the effectiveness of the marketing process at Carroll College to facilitate an increase in matriculations of transfer students to Carroll. Further multivariable testing will allow us to zero in on specific regions and marketing methodologies that have been identified as being the most effective in generating transfer student interest, application, and eventual matriculations. By combining this information with the recommendations for data collection of responses to inquiries and applications, we feel confident we can achieve the charter-established goal of drawing 100 transfer students to Carroll each year. On behalf of our team, we'd like to thank you for your time, your attention, and your consideration of our project. Go Saints!